Hi everyone, I'm Sally, and in this video I'm talking about a technique which can help you with constructing faces and drawing portraits. You might have heard about the Loomis method before, and today I will break it down and try to make it as easily understandable as possible, so that way you can draw something out of it and use it for your own individual artistic growth. First, I'm going to show the very basic concept and proportions, and then I will put the theory into practice and combine it with drawing a portrait from a reference photo. And I just want to mention that these are two separate things. The drawing process documented by Andrew Loomis is a great guidance for constructing heads from imagination, but seeing and using the Loomis head in a reference photo is a whole other story. Before we begin, I want to say I am still learning and developing myself, and we will always be within this process, but I am showing this because it helped me tremendously in my growth. But what Loomis documented is so much more than the basics we touch here. I will focus on the very basic head construction according to Loomis. I'm going to use tracing paper for each important step so you can clearly see the layers we add, and I hope this will make things more understandable. I'm going to draw three heads here with different horizontal angles. The very left is a front view, the one next to it is going to be a 3/4 view, and the one on the right will be a side view of the head. Oh, and please forgive me if I'm not 100% accurate and perfect with all geometric shapes. Alright, step number 1 would be to just draw a ball shape. This ball is supposed to represent the cranium, and I think breaking down the whole process to start with this very simple shape is extremely helpful to not be too overwhelmed and not knowing where to start. The beginning will always be just a ball. For each step, we're going to use what we already have, so when you have the ball shape, you can then determine the direction the head is facing to. And for this, all we have to do is add 2 lines, basically splitting the ball in quarters. It's pretty easy for the front view because it's just facing straight towards us, so it's pretty clear, but for the 3/4 view, you need to remind yourself to think in a 3D space. So the middle line will move more towards the right side and wrap around the ball shape. So you should be able to tell in which direction the ball is facing. Then for the side view, the middle line completely disappears because it matches with the right side of the face. The equator line is exactly the same for all 3 because the heads do not tilt up or downwards, and I just did this for these 3 so you have a clear comparison, but I encourage you to practice these balls with all kinds of directions. It will improve your feeling for 3D objects and sharpen your understanding of perspective. Moving on to step number 2 for the Loomis head is to cut off the sides of the head. So since this is the front view, you actually don't have to draw the sides, and we can just take a chunk of this ball because the head is actually not perfectly round. For the 3/4 view, you will see a lot more of the side, and Andrew Loomis described it as being roughly 2/3 of the initial ball size, and since this is a flat side of the head, we will put a straight cross in here, dividing the circle into 4 parts. The vertical center line will mark the half of the ball again. If you keep thinking about 3-dimensionality, this line will wrap around the whole ball and divide it. The horizontal center line is connecting to the middle line of the ball and will show you the direction the head is facing. For the side view, of course, the side circle will be perfectly round and the cross is straight. Again, this is a great exercise to practice quickly, and it will really improve your feeling for 3-dimensional space. The next step is probably one of the most useful guides, in my opinion, for building up a portrait, the rule of the thirds. So what we're going to do now is to create 3 equal parts for the face, and we begin with what we already established. We use the horizontal middle line of the ball shape, and this line is actually the brow line. It is where we will place the eyebrows later. Now we can take the upper part of the side circle, and this is basically the hairline, and we take that exact same distance and copy it downwards 2 times, which will give us the nose and chin line. The general idea is that the average human face is divided into 3 equal parts from hair to brow to nose to chin line. And if you take this serious, I guarantee it will improve your drawing process if you pay attention to it. Now this is again just a rough guide for a very average generic face and can be adapted perfectly for every person, and you have to be flexible when drawing from a reference. Now we have to extend the middle line of the face and wander off the ball shape we created, because obviously our faces do not wrap around a ball, so we need to adjust and straighten it up to the chin line. In the next step, we add the jaw, and the front view can actually not offer you that much information here. That's why I have multiple turns of this head. So in 3/4, you can take the vertical middle line of the side circle as a starting point to then extend the line a bit further than the nose line and then connect it to the chin. And on the other side, you can connect the jaw to the brow line on the ball shape. I'll do the same for the side view here, and you can clearly see how you can use this side of the head to determine the jaw. And by the way, the ears will actually be in one of these quarters here, but that's for later. So now that we combined all these steps with structure, we have a very generic rough head shape with realistic proportions. I think nailing proportions is probably the hardest part of drawing, at least for me. But if you get this right, you have a lot of room for your approach to finish the drawing. If the basic proportions are off, people will be able to tell. It will not look right. But for me, the structural process helps me tremendously in finding the right angles and distances. You also have plenty of freedom to adjust this method, and I believe it is actually intended to be used that way. Let's say you're drawing fantasy creatures or comic characters with exaggerated features. The process will be the same, but you can manipulate selective rules to fit into your vision. Important is just to use a plan for proportions, to do the initial work, to then be able to create something believable. I think the idea is to just know the plain rule in order to be able to break it. So again, this here would be a very generic, simplified approach to drawing a head from any angle. But I noticed people, including myself, have some struggles with applying this theory to actual portrait drawings from reference. So let me show you my process and how I adapt this blueprint for an existing reference. Once I have my reference, I start with a ball shape. Very simple, nothing can go wrong yet, nothing to be afraid of. Then we add the middle line, and it's important here to notice that her head is actually tilting downwards. You can see this by looking at her hair and how much you can actually see the top of her head. Time to define the equator of the ball, and now you can already tell the ball is pointing slightly downwards and to the left. These are already important information and really useful, even if it doesn't look like a lot yet. Now this is a tricky part to put the flat side of the head. What I like to keep in mind here is that the middle of the side circle will be close to the brow line. The top is close to the hairline and the bottom is close to the nose line. The left part of the circle will almost touch the eyebrows, and the top will touch the line on top of the head, separating the front and back of the head. So since we can clearly see the top of her head, the side circle will not end at the edge of the ball. I'll show you that in a bit. The side is flat. That means we extend the brow line straight across the side. Then we complete the flat cross, and here I can show you that the vertical cross line will connect to the top of her head. It gets a bit easier now with applying the rule of the thirds, which rarely fails. We take the brow line we already established and add the nose line underneath, and I already mentioned that the bottom of the side circle is roughly where the nose line is. And in this case, the photo is a bit misleading because of its perspective, so always keep that in mind. Now we have the distance from brows to nose, and we can easily copy that 2 times for the hairline and chin. Her hairline might look a bit off, but I think the hairstyle makes it seem like the hair grows closer to the eyebrows. In any case, we will consider that later. What I want to show you again is those exact same distances you can use as a blueprint, and it's rarely off by a lot. The final step in terms of the Loomis head is adding the jaw. And for this, I can just connect the ball shapes starting at the brow line with the chin line, and on the right I connect the chin line with the middle part of the side circle. Now I really don't need the ball shape anymore, and I can clean the edge up a bit. It's time to place the features and refine the shapes of her face now, so most of the times I will erase all my guidelines lightly and then start sketching the edge of the hair and continue with the eyebrows. In the beginning, I just use rough lines to indicate the direction of the brows and don't worry about single hair strands. I put the rough shape of the nose in the already defined area and tried to look for my indicator to place the eye. Loomis documented that we can take the edge of the nostrils as a guide to line up with the inner corners of the eyes, as you can see right now. This is the point where I start correcting myself, and I noticed her hairline was off a bit. As soon as I established the rough guidelines, I try to focus more on the reference, because after all, you want to capture what's on the photo and not blindly apply methods. So you will see me correcting the drawing frequently. I take the guidance from Loomis as something I can constantly compare and check with my actual drawing. It's fine if you don't nail the construct, as long as you go back and recheck everything, question yourself and what you did. At least that's my approach to it, and I find it hard to believe that anyone can just dive right into it, draw the Loomis head with a reference, and it's gonna be the perfect end result. For me, correcting myself is part of the process. For the mouth, there is also a helpful tip or measurement guide from Loomis. Usually, it's easy to assume the mouth line is right in between of nose and chin, and it's close but not really accurate. The distance to the chin is actually bigger, so that's something I always try to keep in mind. Another useful trick with the mouth is to keep in mind the mouth line is usually on the same level as the jaw, which doesn't apply here because of the angle, but I can still show you what I mean. Okay, so for the ear, the general rule is that you can place it between the brow line and the nose line. But we're talking about front view here, so that doesn't apply to this reference. If I keep her tilt in mind, the connection would look something like this. You can see me finishing up this portrait now and adding my own touch. This is basically how I utilize the Loomis method for my personal process. Although I think it is more important to rely on your observation skills for drawing from reference, I find these information so valuable to keep rechecking myself and if what I'm doing is correct. I want to point out again that this was just a tip of the Loomis iceberg, and in his book, he talks about a lot more, and there is so much to discover for yourself. But for now, these simple steps were all I need to improve drastically in terms of portrait drawing. And if you keep adding different methods and measurement guides, I'm sure you cannot lose the progress you made on your artistic journey. And I like to remind myself that these methods are meant to help you, not to tie you up in endless rules. I believe they are meant to be adapted and developed by us as artists. What works better for one might not work as well for another. So just take the things out of it which help you the most.